My wife demanded our $500,000 home and my pension in the divorce she planned behind my back. She called me a failure, but she forgot about the wooden box I made for her on our first anniversary. Tucked beneath the velvet lining was a photograph and a handwritten note she begged me to destroy. This note didn't confess to an affair. It confessed to a crime that would soon cost her everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. The silence in this house is a physical thing now. It presses in on me, heavy and suffocating, a constant reminder of the life that was ripped away. I find myself in my half-finished workshop most days, the scent of sawdust and pine, usually a comfort, but now it just smells like another broken promise. My hands, usually steady and sure as they guide a piece of wood across the saw, now tremble with a rage I haven't felt in 40 years. I look at the unfinished birdhouse on the workbench, a project I'd started for my granddaughter, and my mind drifts back to all the other projects I set aside, all the dreams I packed away in dusty boxes, for her, for Eleanor. I remember 1,998 like it was yesterday. The sun was bright, and my prized 1,967 Ford Mustang, cherry red and gleaming, was parked in the driveway. It was my baby, the one thing I had that was truly just for me. But Eleanor wanted to join the Northwood Country Club. She said it was for us, for our future, for making the right connections so our daughter Emily could have the best. So I sold it. I watched a man drive away with a piece of my soul for $20,000. I told myself it was worth it to see her happy, to see her fit in with the wives of doctors and lawyers. And for a while, I believed it. That 20 grand was just the beginning. I gave up my dream of turning this workshop into a real business. Instead, I kept my steady, boring accounting job. I ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch for a decade, meticulously packing my own brown bag every morning so we could save every extra penny. We funneled it all into Emily's college fund. Over $60,000 for her to attend NYU. A dream she had, a dream we made reality. I canceled fishing trips with my brother James. I told my buddies I was too busy for our annual camping trip to the mountains. My life became a series of small, quiet sacrifices, each one a brick in the foundation of the life Eleanor wanted. And now, I know what she did with that life. She took my sacrifices, my Mustang, my workshop dreams, my simple lunches, and she used them to pay for hotel rooms with another man. The thought is a physical pain, a hot poker twisting in my gut. It's not just the money. It's the sheer, breathtaking disrespect for everything I gave her, for everything I was. I walk out of the workshop and into the living room. The afternoon sun slants through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Every object in this room screams her name, her influence. Our wedding photo sits on the mantelpiece, right above the fireplace we used to sit in front of on cold winter nights. I was young and brimming with a naive sort of pride. She, beautiful and smiling, a smile I now know how to read, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, even then. This house, this $500,000 house that we bought when it was just a fixer-upper, it's not just brick and mortar. It's the wallpaper in Emily's old room that we spent a whole weekend putting up together, laughing as we got more paste on ourselves than on the walls. It's the scratch on the hardwood floor by the door, where our old dog Duke used to greet us. It's 45 years of shared memories, of Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings. Now, when I look at our wedding photo, I don't feel the warmth of that day. I feel a cold, sickening lurch in my stomach. The photo is no longer a symbol of our love. It's a monument to a lie. The comfortable armchair where she used to sit and read for hours now looks empty, accusatory. The silence in this room, once a peaceful quiet we shared, is now a roaring vacuum, filled with the ghosts of unspoken truths and decades of deception. It's the contrast that kills you. The memory of Emily's laughter echoes down the hallway, now replaced by the deafening tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. Each tick feels like a second of my life being counted down, a second I wasted on a woman who was planning her escape. I feel like a fool, a blind, trusting fool. The signs were all there, weren't they? The late-night charity meetings, the new expensive perfume, the way she started locking her phone. I chose to ignore them, because facing the truth was too painful. It was easier to believe the lie. Last night, unable to sleep, I went up to the attic. I told myself I was just going to clear out some old junk, to do something, anything, to keep my mind from spiraling. That's when I saw it. Tucked away behind a stack of old National Geographic magazines was a small wooden box I hadn't seen in years. It was a keepsake box I made for her on our very first anniversary. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside, beneath a layer of yellowed lace, were old photographs and trinkets from our early years together. And there, at the very bottom, was a single, sealed envelope. Her handwriting was on the front. "Arthur, read this only if you ever doubt my love." The irony was a bitter pill. I almost threw it away. But something made me stop. I slid it open with my thumbnail. Inside wasn't a love letter. It was a confession. A letter she had written to me just a week before our wedding. One she must have slipped into the box later, perhaps as some twisted form of insurance. In it, she confessed to a profound lie about her past. A secret so shameful she begged me in the letter to forgive her and destroy it, to never speak of it again. A secret that, if revealed, would completely shatter the pristine image she had so carefully crafted for herself in our community. I had kept my promise. I had buried it, forgotten it, for her. Now, holding this piece of paper, I felt a new kind of pain layered on top of the betrayal. It was the pain of knowing she was not just unfaithful now. She had been dishonest from the very beginning. This letter wasn't a relic of the past. It was a weapon she had unwittingly left for me. The pain of her current affair was a knife in the back. This was like discovering the knife had been there for 45 years, and I'd just never felt it until now. My mind flashed to my niece, Sarah, my brother's daughter. She always looked up to me, always came to me for advice. A good, honest kid. She deserved a family that valued loyalty, not this. The shock that had been numbing my senses for days began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a man who had been played for a fool, and the game was over. I sat on the dusty attic floor, the letter in my hand, and I let myself feel it all. The anger, the humiliation, the deep, soul-crushing sadness. I whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of the woman I thought I married. "Eleanor, how could you?" But there was no answer. There never would be. I started to blame myself. Maybe I was too boring, too predictable. Maybe if I had just bought a newer car, or taken her on more lavish vacations. I stopped that train of thought dead in its tracks. No, this wasn't my fault. My mistake wasn't in loving her. It was in loving her without limits, in believing that my sacrifice could somehow buy her happiness, her loyalty. That was my failing. I had tried to fill a void in her that was unfilled. The realization was both devastating and liberating. I was no longer responsible for her happiness. I was only responsible for my own, and for justice. My hands, which had been trembling, were now perfectly still. I carefully folded the letter and walked downstairs to my office. I placed it inside my steel safe, behind my father's old watch and my honorable discharge papers from the army. It felt right, putting it there among things that represented true honor and commitment. Then I picked up my phone. Her picture smiled back at me from the screen. I stared at it for a long moment. Then my thumb moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in months. I navigated to her contact, and I pressed the button, delete. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. It was the first shot fired in a war she didn't even know had begun. That night, I didn't sit in the dark. I turned on every light in the living room, banishing the shadows. The house still felt empty, but it was no longer a space of sorrow. It was a headquarters, a command center. The ticking of the grandfather clock no longer sounded like a countdown to doom. It sounded like a metronome, marking the steady, deliberate rhythm of my impending victory. The fight to protect my life, my dignity, and the legacy I had built was just getting started, and I was going to win. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. Sleep did not come that night, but it wasn't the restless, grief-stricken tossing and turning of the nights before. It was a different kind of wakefulness. A focused, simmering energy that felt like a long dormant engine finally turning over. The moment the first gray light of dawn touched the window pane, I was up. The old Arthur, the man who would have agonized, who would have paced the floor wondering what to do, was gone. In his place was a man with a singular crystalline purpose. I showered, dressed, and made my coffee with the steady, methodical movements of a soldier preparing for battle. The tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by a firm resolve. At precisely 9 o'clock, I picked up the phone and dialed the number for David Chen, the lawyer who had handled our estate planning years ago. A sharp, no-nonsense man. The perfect man for this job. When his assistant put me through, there was no hesitation in my voice. No preamble. "David," I said, my tone as level as a carpenter's plane, "it's Arthur Montgomery. I need you to file an immediate injunction to freeze all joint assets held by my wife, Eleanor Montgomery, and me. Specifically, our investment portfolio with Morgan Stanley, account number ending in 7,742. It's valued at roughly $350,000. I have discovered evidence of significant financial misconduct and fraudulent intent." I could hear the surprise in the silence on the other end of the line. David knew us as the happy, stable couple from the church potlucks. "Arthur," he finally said, his professional caution kicking in, "that's a very serious step." "Are you certain?" I looked at the copy of the bank transfer I had made from Denise's file, the one showing $35,000 moved to a new, unknown account. Certainty wasn't a strong enough word. "I have undeniable proof, David," I stated. "I'll be at your office in an hour with the documentation. This is not a request, it's an instruction." I hung up before he could reply. There was a newfound power in that simple act, a feeling of taking back the control I had unknowingly ceded for years. The drive to David's office downtown was different. I didn't just see the traffic. I saw the faces of the people in the cars around me, each living their own lives, blissfully unaware of the wars being waged in the quiet suburban homes they passed. My grip on the steering wheel of my old Ford was solid, my knuckles white not from fear, but from determination. David's office was on the 25th floor of a glass and steel tower that scraped the Atlanta sky. As I stepped into the hushed, carpeted reception area, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was the right place to be. David's assistant, a kind young woman named Maria, greeted me warmly. "Mr. Montgomery, so good to see you. Can I get you some coffee?" I accepted, and as she handed me the warm mug, her eyes met mine with a flicker of genuine concern. "Are you doing okay, sir?" she asked softly. Her simple question, her small act of human decency, almost broke me. Here was a complete stranger showing more compassion in a single glance than my own wife had shown in months. It was a painful, stark contrast that solidified my resolve into something as hard as granite. It was a reminder of what was real and what was a performance. I simply nodded and said, "I will be, Maria." "Thank you." When David saw the files Denise had prepared, the photographs, the bank statements, the plane tickets, his professional demeanor cracked. He leaned back in his leather chair, took off his glasses, and rubbed his eyes. "My God, Arthur," he muttered. "I am so sorry." He looked at the sealed letter I had found in the attic, the one detailing Eleanor's youthful deception. "This changes things," he said, his voice now sharp with legal strategy. "This establishes a pattern of deceit that goes back decades. It's not just an affair, it's a long con." He explained the legal steps and the motions we would file. My mind, which had been foggy with grief, was now sharp, absorbing every detail, every strategy. As I signed the papers authorizing the freeze, my signature wasn't the shaky scrawl of a heartbroken old man. It was the firm, decisive mark of a man taking his life back. It didn't take long. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Eleanor's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a slow, deliberate breath. I was in control now. "Arthur!" Her voice was a shrill, panicked shriek, stripped of all its usual polite Southern charm. "What in God's name have you done? The bank just called. Our investment account is frozen. I can't access a single penny." I remained silent. I let her words hang in the air, a testament to her true priorities. Not, "How are you?" not, "What's wrong?" but, "Where is the money?" she continued, her voice rising with hysteria. "I had bills to pay, Arthur. There was a deposit for the hospital gala. Important things. This is our future you're messing with. Our future. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I pictured her standing beside her lover, the two of them planning their Italian getaway with my future, with the money from my sold Mustang, from my decade of peanut butter sandwiches. "What future is that, Eleanor?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "The one in Atlanta? Or the one you booked a one-way ticket to in Tuscany?" The silence on her end was more damning than any confession. It was a silence filled with the dawning horror of being caught. When she finally spoke, her voice had shifted from panic to a cold, venomous rage. "You have no idea what you've just done," she hissed. "You will regret this." I almost laughed. Regret was a luxury I could no longer afford. "No, Eleanor," I said, and the finality in my own voice surprised me. "The time for regrets is over. The time for consequences has just begun." I hung up the phone. I looked at my hand. It was perfectly steady. The power shift was complete. She thought this was about money. She shouted that it was her money too. But this was never just about the money. This was about a lifetime of lies. If you believe that betrayal cuts deeper than any financial loss, comment with the word loyalty below. The next 2 days were a blur of strategic planning. I met with David again, and we went over everything. The plan for the anniversary party began to take shape, not just as an act of revenge, but as a public unmasking, a stage where the truth would be the star performer. It was during our second meeting that David had an idea. "Arthur, this Dr. Matthews. Let's see what we can find." Sometimes desperate people leave tracks. We were in his office, and David typed the doctor's full name, Richard Matthews, into a public records database on his computer. We watched as the screen populated with information. Mortgages, business licenses, and then something else. A series of civil court filings. "Well, well," David said, leaning closer to the screen. "It seems our good doctor isn't just a home wrecker. He's a gambler." The record showed significant liens against his properties from a casino in Biloxi. He was in debt, deep in debt to the tune of over $200,000. Not only that, but a search of medical board records revealed a malpractice suit filed 2 years prior, settled out of court for a substantial, undisclosed sum. The picture became chillingly clear. Eleanor wasn't his partner in passion. She was his financial escape hatch. Her $35,000 was just a down payment. He was after our entire nest egg. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated, predatory scheme. "This is our ace in the hole, Arthur," David said, a grim smile on his face. "We're not just exposing an affair, we're exposing a conspiracy to commit fraud." This new information felt like a shot of adrenaline. It transformed my plan from personal vengeance into a righteous crusade. They weren't just two people who fell in love. They were predators. The phone call came on Thursday evening, 2 days before the party. It was Eleanor. Her tone was completely different. Gone was the rage, replaced by a syrupy, cloying sweetness that made my skin crawl. "Artie, darling," she cooed, "I think we've had a terrible misunderstanding. I was just so stressed, with the planning for the gala. I overreacted. I said nothing, letting her dig her own grave. I'm coming over tomorrow afternoon," she announced, not asked. "I have some ideas for the house renovations I want to show you. Spreadsheets, paint swatches. You know how much you love a good plan." The condescension dripped from her words. She still saw me as the simple, predictable accountant she could easily manipulate. The man who loved a good plan. Oh, I had a plan, all right. "I'll be here," was all I said. The next day, she arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, carrying a leather-bound portfolio. She looked immaculate, dressed in a crisp, white linen suit, a picture of suburban grace. She spread her documents across the dining room table, blueprints for a new kitchen, spreadsheets detailing costs, fabric samples. It was a masterful performance. She spoke of our future, of growing old together in this house. She was trying to build a bridge back to the life she had, until she could secure the funds for the life she wanted. I let her talk. I watched her, this woman I had shared a bed with for 45 years, and I felt nothing but a profound, icy distance. She was a stranger performing a role, a very good actress, but an actress nonetheless. She was so caught up in her own performance that she didn't notice the coldness in my eyes, the stillness in my posture. She thought she was reeling me back in. She had no idea she was simply walking deeper into the trap. She even tried to use our past against me, pulling out an old faded photograph of us from her wallet. "Remember this, Artie?" she said, her voice soft and nostalgic. "Our honeymoon in Savannah. You promised me the world that day." I looked at the picture of the two young, hopeful people. They have to dig through the ruins of the past, I thought, just to find a justification for their greed in the present. It didn't move me. It only strengthened my resolve. The woman in that picture was gone, if she ever truly existed at all. As she packed up her portfolio, her confidence restored, she paused at the door. "Oh, and Artie," she said, a triumphant little smile playing on her lips. "Martin Wells told me about the little get-together you're planning for Saturday. How sweet of you. I told him to invite the Hendersons and the Clarks. The more the merrier, right?" The sheer arrogance of it was stunning. She was now actively helping me assemble the audience for her own execution. She thought it was a simple neighborhood barbecue. She had no concept of the public stage I was building for her. I smiled back, a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. It was the smile of a predator watching its prey wander confidently into the crosshairs. "That's a wonderful idea, Eleanor," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "You're right, the more the merrier." She left, convinced she had won, that her charm had once again smoothed over her indiscretions. She didn't know that I had just spent the morning with David, finalizing the documents that would not only protect my assets but would transfer the majority of them into a trust for Emily, effective immediately. She didn't know about the large poster board hidden in my workshop, covered with enlarged copies of her hotel rendezvous and her lover's gambling debts. She didn't know that the caterer for the party had been given very specific instructions for her food and drink. The game was set. The pieces were in place. That evening I received an email from Martin. The subject line read, "Final guest list." I opened it. 47 names. 47 witnesses. I closed my laptop and looked out at the setting Sunday. "They think I've already lost," I whispered to the empty room. But the game is just beginning. The curtain was about to rise on the final act of Eleanor Montgomery's carefully constructed life. And I was the director. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. The day of the party arrived under a brilliant, cloudless Georgia sky. It was the kind of beautiful, sunny Saturday that felt like a cruel joke, a stark contrast to the storm I was about to unleash. The house, our house of 45 years, was filled with the cheerful sounds of friends and neighbors arriving. Laughter echoed from the backyard where I had set up tables and chairs, and the scent of grilled chicken mingled with the sweet perfume of the azaleas blooming along the fence. From the outside, it was a perfect picture of a golden anniversary celebration, a testament to a long and happy life together. Inside, I was a coiled spring of cold, calculated calm. My daughter, Emily, had flown in from New York the night before, her eyes shining with love and pride for the surprise we had planned. She hugged me tightly. "Dad, this is amazing. Mom is going to be so touched." The words were a bitter irony, a pang of guilt for the innocence I was about to shatter, but it had to be done. Eleanor arrived at 4 o'clock, playing her part to perfection. She feigned total surprise, her hands flying to her mouth in a gesture of shocked delight as everyone yelled, "Surprise!" She moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting hugs and congratulations, her smile radiant, her voice dripping with false modesty. She was the star of the show, the beloved wife being honored for her decades of devotion. She had no idea she was the guest of honor at her own public execution. She found me by the grill, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Artie, you shouldn't have." Her eyes sparkled with what looked like affection, but I saw it for what it was, the glint of a predator who believed her prey was still blissfully unaware. "Nothing is too much for you, Eleanor," I replied, my voice even giving nothing away. I had arranged for my lawyer, David Chen, to arrive discreetly at 4:30, along with a certified notary. They were seated at a small table near the back, looking like just another pair of old friends. The centerpiece of my plan, a large projector screen I'd rented, was set up at one end of the patio, currently displaying a pleasant slideshow of old family photos of us at Niagara Falls. Emily's first day of school, Christmases past, a visual reminder of the life she was so willing to throw away. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn, I knew it was time. I stepped up to the small microphone I had set up. The cheerful chatter of the 47 guests slowly died down as they turned their attention to me. Eleanor stood beside me, beaming, her hand resting possessively on my arm. She expected a speech full of loving platitudes and sentimental memories. She was about to be sorely disappointed. "Friends, neighbors, Emily," I began, my voice steady and clear, carrying across the yard. "Thank you all for being here today to celebrate what should have been a milestone. 45 years. It's a long time to build a life with someone. A long time to build trust." I paused, letting the weight of that word, trust, settle over the crowd. I saw a few people nod in agreement. Eleanor squeezed my arm, a silent prompt to get on with the sappy part. I turned to my right, where my neighbor, Martin Wells, was standing. "Martin," I said, "you've known me for 30 years. In all that time, have you ever known me to be a dishonest man? A man prone to fantasy?" Martin, bless his heart, looked a little confused, but answered loudly, "Never, Artie. You're the straightest arrow I know." I then looked to another old friend, Bill Peterson, a man I'd served on the church board with for 2 decades. "Bill, would you say I am a man who makes rash, unfounded accusations?" Bill shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. You're as level-headed as they come." These were small testimonials, but they were crucial. They were my character witnesses, establishing my credibility before I dropped the bomb. They were a foundation of truth to counteract the lies. I had their attention now. The mood had shifted from celebratory to curious. I turned back to the microphone. "I'm glad you all feel that way," I said, my voice hardening slightly, "because for the past several months, I've been living in a fantasy. A fantasy that the woman standing next to me was the faithful, loving wife I thought I had married." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Eleanor's hand on my arm went rigid. Her smile froze, then vanished, replaced by a look of confusion and dawning panic. "Arthur, what are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice tight. "Don't make a scene." "Oh, I'm not the one who made the scene, Eleanor," I said, turning to face her fully, my voice now resonating with the cold fury I had kept suppressed for weeks. "You were." I clicked a small remote in my hand. The slideshow of happy family photos vanished from the projector screen. In its place, a new image appeared, large and in damningly clear color. It was a photograph Denise had taken. Eleanor, laughing, leaning across a candlelit table at a fancy restaurant, her hand intimately covering the hand of another man, Dr. Richard Matthews. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through our friends. I heard someone say, "Who is that?" Eleanor's face went completely white. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. "Arthur, stop this," she hissed, her eyes darting around at the horrified faces of our neighbors. "This is insane. It's a misunderstanding." I didn't answer her. I just clicked the remote again. The next image was of Eleanor and Dr. Matthews entering the Street Regis Hotel downtown, his arm possessively around her waist. Click. A photo of them kissing passionately in the front seat of her white Mercedes, parked in a secluded corner of Piedmont Park. Click, click, click. A relentless barrage of her betrayal, projected for all to see. With each image, her composure crumbled further. The sophisticated matriarch of our social circle was being exposed as a common cheat. "These are lies," she finally shrieked, finding her voice. "Photoshopped. You're a bitter, jealous old man, Arthur. You're losing your mind." Her defense was predictable. Attack my sanity. But I was prepared. I held up my hand for silence. "Losing my mind, am I?" I asked the crowd. "Perhaps. But my bank isn't, and neither is Morgan Stanley." I clicked the remote again. The screen now showed a scanned copy of the bank statement. A transfer of $35,000 from our joint retirement account to a newly created account in her name only. The number, $35,000, hung in the air, a tangible symbol of her greed. I heard gasps. In our circle, that was a significant amount of money. It was a betrayal everyone could understand in black and white. And where was that money going, Eleanor? I pressed on, my voice like a hammer. Perhaps to fund a little trip? The next image was a copy of the flight itinerary. 2 one-way tickets to Tuscany, Italy, departing in 3 weeks. One for Eleanor Montgomery, the other for Dr. Richard Matthews. The crowd was in an uproar now. People were talking openly, pointing, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. Eleanor was hyperventilating, her eyes wide with terror. She had been so sure of her intellectual superiority, so confident in my gullibility, that she had never considered the possibility of being so thoroughly and publicly exposed. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her in real time. She looked at our daughter, Emily, her face pleading. Emily just stared back, tears streaming down her face, her expression one of profound, heartbreaking disillusionment. The father she adored and the mother she idolized were engaged in a battle she never knew was being waged. This was the moment of maximum desperation. And as I had predicted, Eleanor did the unthinkable. She turned on our child. "Emily!" she cried, her voice cracking with a desperate theatrical sob. "Tell him! Tell your father he's wrong! You know how much I love him. Don't you stand there and side with him. After everything I've done for you, who paid for your apartment in New York? Who flew out to see you every month?" It was a disgusting, manipulative display. She was trying to use our daughter as a human shield to weaponize Emily's love against me. It was the most cowardly, selfish act I had ever witnessed. I saw the pain and confusion on Emily's face as her own mother tried to force her to choose sides in this public spectacle. In that moment, I understood that a parent's love is meant to be a shield that protects their child from the world, not a weapon to be used against them. It's a feeling of wanting to stand in front of them and take any hit aimed their way, isn't it? A feeling of pure, selfless protection. If you believe every child deserves to be protected, not used, please comment with the word "protect" below. I stepped forward, physically placing myself between Eleanor and our daughter. "Enough, Eleanor," I said, my voice low and final. "You will not do this. You will not put her in the middle of the mess you created." It was then that her body betrayed her, just as she had betrayed me. A low, ominous gurgle echoed from her midsection, audible in the sudden silence. Her eyes widened in a new kind of panic, a more primal, immediate fear. The carefully measured doses of laxatives I had been mixing into her iced tea all afternoon had chosen this precise moment of maximum stress to declare war. "Arthur!" she gasped, one hand clutching her stomach. "What did you do?" I gave her a small, cold smile. "Nothing a fraction as damaging as what you've done to us, my dear." She made a desperate, stumbling lunge towards the house, towards the bathroom, but it was too late. I will spare you the graphic details. Suffice it to say, in front of 47 of our closest friends and neighbors, Eleanor Montgomery experienced a humiliation so profound, so visceral, it transcended the mere exposure of her affair. It was a complete and total system failure, a perfect metaphor for the collapse of her character. In the ensuing chaos, as guests averted their eyes and made hasty, awkward exits, my lawyer, David, stepped forward. He stood next to me, a calm, authoritative presence in the storm. "If I could have your attention for just one more moment," he said, his voice cutting through the remaining murmurs. The few people who remained, mostly our oldest and closest friends, turned to him. "In light of the evidence of conspiracy to commit spousal fraud presented here today," David announced, holding up a legally notarized document, "Mr. Montgomery has, as of this morning, executed a new estate plan. The entirety of his assets, including this $500,000 property and all investment funds, have been placed into an irrevocable trust." He paused for effect. "The sole beneficiary of this trust is his daughter, Emily Montgomery." A final, collective gasp. Eleanor, who had just emerged from the house, looking pale and defeated, heard this. The last vestige of hope drained from her face, leaving behind a hollow mask of utter despair. She had lost the money. She had lost her reputation. She had lost her dignity. And in her final, desperate act of manipulation, she had lost her daughter. She stared at me, then at Emily, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. There was nothing left to say. There were no more lies to tell, no more performances to give. She turned and walked, not with pride, but with the shuffling gait of a defeated soldier, out the side gate and away from the life she had systematically destroyed. I stood on the patio, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the wreckage of my marriage. I pulled my daughter into my arms. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt the heavy weight on my chest begin to lift. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was Relief. The quiet, cleansing relief of a storm that had finally passed. The long, painful war was over, and I was still standing. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment below to let me know you're here with me. The year that followed the anniversary party was one of quiet reconstruction. The divorce was swift and surprisingly uncontested. Perhaps after the public humiliation, Eleanor had no fight left in her, or perhaps my lawyer, David, made it chillingly clear that any legal battle would only result in her secrets being entered into the public record. She walked away with the bare minimum the law required, a fraction of what she had tried to steal. The grand life she had envisioned for herself in Tuscany evaporated. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, which still churned with the story of that fateful party, that her affair with Dr. Matthews had imploded almost immediately. His gambling debts and tarnished reputation apparently weren't as attractive without my $500,000 home as a backdrop. Last I heard, she was renting a small, sterile apartment on the other side of town, a place with no history, no memories, a fitting home for a woman who had tried to erase her own. As for me, the first order of business was to sell the house on Peachtree Drive. It sold quickly, for a good price, but the real value was in the unburdening. The day I handed the keys to the new family, a young couple with bright, hopeful eyes, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The house was no longer a home filled with happy memories. It had become a museum of lies, and I was finally free of my curatorial duties. With the proceeds, I bought a smaller place, a tidy little bungalow with a large, detached two-car garage and a modest yard that backed up to a quiet park. It was perfect. The first thing I did before even unpacking the kitchen boxes was set up my workshop in that garage. The scent of fresh-cut cedar filled the air as I built my workbenches, my hands sure and steady. The dream I had sold for her 30 years ago, the one I had packed away with my old Mustang, was finally being realized. It wasn't just a place to build things with wood. It was a place to rebuild myself. My relationship with my daughter, Emily, blossomed in a way it hadn't in years. The shared trauma of that night bound us together, but it was the honesty that followed that truly healed us. We talked for hours, really talked, for the first time since she was a teenager. She apologized for not seeing the signs, and I apologized for creating an environment where she felt she couldn't speak up. We found a new, stronger foundation for our relationship, one built not on obligation or family tradition, but on mutual respect and a shared understanding of what truly matters. She and her wonderful fiancé now drive down from New York every other month, filling my small house with laughter and the smell of her amazing apple pie. My life, once a sprawling, empty stage, was now filled with smaller, more meaningful moments. I reconnected with my old friends from the classic car club, the ones I had drifted away from while trying to keep up with Eleanor's social climbing. We spent Saturdays tinkering with engines and talking about carburetors, a simple, honest camaraderie that soothed my soul. One of the most important decisions I made was what to do with a portion of the money Eleanor had tried to take. It felt tainted, and I didn't want it. So, I took $10,000 and worked with the local high school to establish the Montgomery Integrity Scholarship, awarded each year to a student who demonstrated exceptional character and honesty. It was my way of turning her deceit into something positive, a way of investing in the kind of values she had long since abandoned. It was during a volunteer event for the scholarship fund that I truly felt the shift inside me. I was helping set up tables at a local community center, the same one where the anniversary party had taken place. I had hesitated to go back, but I knew I had to. As I stood in that hall, now filled with cheerful students and hopeful parents, I realized it held no power over me anymore. The ghosts were gone. I was no longer defined by the worst day of my life. I was being defined by what I chose to do next. It was an act of giving back, of transforming my personal pain into a public good, that finally, truly healed me. I learned that you don't find peace by holding on to anger. You find it by letting go and by using your strength to lift others up. I don't need her apology. I have my life. I did hear from her one last time. About 6 months ago, a letter arrived, no return address, but I recognized the elegant, sloping handwriting immediately. It was a long, rambling letter, full of excuses disguised as apologies. She blamed her unhappiness, her affair, her greed on everything but herself, a lonely childhood, the pressure to keep up appearances, her lover's influence. It was the letter of a perpetual victim. At the end, she wrote, "I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me, Artie." I read the letter once, then I walked out to my new workshop. I took the letter, folded it carefully, and used it as kindling to start a small, controlled fire in the old steel barrel I use for scraps. I watched as the paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. I wasn't burning it out of anger. I was burning it because it was irrelevant. Her forgiveness was something she needed, not something I needed to give. My peace wasn't dependent on her remorse. My peace came from within. It came from setting a boundary, from closing a door and never looking back. I had my own life to live, and it had no room for her ghosts. This whole ordeal has taught me some hard-earned lessons. I've learned a few things about family, about money, and about the nature of people in this modern world. For any parents out there, the lesson is this: love your children fiercely, but love them with boundaries. Our job isn't just to provide for them, it's to prepare them. We must teach them that character is more valuable than currency, that integrity is a greater inheritance than any stock portfolio. We cannot buy their love with material things, for a love that can be bought can also be sold to the highest bidder. And for the children, the lesson is one of gratitude and consequence. The sacrifices your parents make are not entitlements. They are gifts. And treating those gifts with disrespect, with greed, will ultimately cost you more than you could ever stand to gain. You may get the house, or the money, but you will lose something far more valuable: your soul. And finally, I've learned something about human nature itself. In a world that often seems to reward the loudest voice and the most ruthless ambition, I've learned that true strength is quiet. It's the quiet dignity of a promise kept, the silent resolve to do the right thing when no one is watching. Character is the only asset that no one can ever take from you. My life is quiet now, but it is full. The ticking of the clock in my hallway is no longer a countdown. It's a gentle rhythm, the heartbeat of my newfound peace. Last week, I was sitting on a park bench just watching the world go by, when a little girl, no older than 5, walked up to me. She was holding a small, bright yellow dandelion. She looked at me with serious eyes, then held it out. "This is for you," she said, simply, and then ran back to her mother. It was a small thing. A weed, really, but in that moment it felt like a message from the universe. A reminder that there is still simple, unprompted kindness in the world. A confirmation that I had made the right choice to step out of the darkness and back into the light. My story was one of betrayal. Yes, but it didn't end there. It became a story about resilience, about integrity, and about the quiet triumph of a life well lived. This journey has taught me so much about what's truly important. We've talked about loyalty, about protection, about justice. Of all the lessons learned from this story about parents, about children, about character, which one resonates most with you and your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.